Welcome to the Great Man Within podcast. Every episode designed to help you discover and live the great man within you. Today we are talking about one of my favorite topics, one of my favorite practices to elevate my performance and well-being every single day, breathwork. And specifically, we're going to talk about how you can establish and incorporate a regular breathwork practice into your daily rituals and habits. Now, there are many benefits that you can expect to experience from establishing a regular breathwork practice. And here are three of those that I've experienced over the last year and a half since I've made this a non-negotiable part of my daily practice. Like, I do not miss a day of breathwork because it's that powerful for me. So number one, heightened energy, especially first thing in the morning. I've always been a slow starter waking up in the morning. My body is stiff. My mind is sluggish. Some people can pop right out of bed and just be into the day. I'm not one of those people. And I carry some latent resentment towards the people who can just get up and go. But the thing that I have found is a regular breathwork practice first thing in the morning, and I'll share with you some of those techniques later on in this episode, has gotten me up out of bed, oxygen circulating through my body, and I'm ready to go even before I take my first sip of coffee, right? So heightened energy first thing in the morning and a sustained energy throughout the day. Number two, a heightened immune system. Over the last year and a half, man, my body has been profoundly resilient. Now, I've made a lot of changes in terms of how I take care of myself with respect to sleep, food that I put in my body, cold showers, and all of those have a contributing effect on how my immune system and how sturdy it is. Breath work is also something I believe highly in, has also contributed to my well-being. And the reason for that is because as my body is taking in more oxygen through a focus on breathing deeply from my belly, because most of us breathe shallowly in our chests, I am oxygenating in my body, sending oxygen to my vital organs, to my muscle tissues, and that allows me to be more resilient. Over the last year and a half, I've probably gotten under the weather maybe 3 or 4 times. And when I say that, it's I'm not debilitated. I've never had to take myself out of the game for a full day, not once. Maybe I'm operating at 75 to 80% where I stop my workouts, but I'm still in the game because I just don't get sick anymore in that way. And I do believe a big part of that has been through boosting my immune system through breath work. You could do the same. And the third part is breath work really helps me to manage my anxiety. Right? I am an intense person. There's a tornado of energy going on beneath my calm exterior. And I love that. But it also can create a lot of pain and chaos internally. And a big part of that is when I unconsciously work myself up with my thoughts, then my breathing becomes shallow. It gets stuck like a knot in the middle of my chest. And with a breathwork practice that brings regular awareness to where I'm breathing, when I feel those moments of anxiety creeping up, I can quickly catch that. Before I drift off into hours or days or even weeks of anxiety, I can catch that quickly. I can drop my breathing back down into my belly. And through that, I'm able to ground, establish presence, and then anxiety dissipates. That is profoundly important, especially right now as we are in this era of turmoil and uncertainty, is learning how to navigate and control our breathing in a way that allows us to reduce our anxiety to become more present in the moment. Now, in this podcast, we talk about 3 categories of things: optimizing your performance, living a life of passion, and living a life of purpose. We're talking about optimizing your performance. It's basically doing the things that you need to do to show up the best version of yourself every single day, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Living a life of passion, we're talking about being inspired and lit up by your own life. And living a life of purpose is being connected to something higher than yourself and leaving this world a better place than how you found it. Breathwork falls squarely into this category of performance, right? You are showing up on a daily basis at the highest version of yourself, because breath work contributes to you having energy, a clear mind, a heightened immune system. So your capacity to handle the demands that the world is throwing at you is heightened, right? So start to think about all of the ways that breath work could potentially offer you some benefits in your world. Now, I believe that breath work is about to have a big moment, kind of like how meditation has had over the last 3 to 5 years. I started my meditation practice back in 2013 when I entered Sex Addicts Anonymous recovery back on, I think it was January 6th of 2013. And I was a person who could never sit still for more than a minute at a time, maximum, right? My mind was always hyperactive. And through using meditation to help break the pattern of just constantly being stimulus and response, stimulus and response, stimulus response, I found that I could reduce my anxiety, that I could create new behaviors, I can interrupt old patterns. It was like one of my anti-drift tools. And I was also quite sheepish about letting anyone know that I was meditating because it still wasn't mainstream at that time. I remember during a day, like when I was still in corporate back in 2013 and 14, where I would have a frustrating day. I'd just get off of 4 hours of straight conference calls where nothing got done. And I would sit in my office and close my eyes for 10 minutes to just like let that clear. And I would be embarrassed when someone walked in and saw me meditating and be like, what the hell are you doing, dude? Right? That was weird for most people. And it felt weird for me. But fast forward to now, like in 2018, 2019, meditation exploded onto the scene. There's not a business out there that hasn't introduced some form of mindfulness practice to their employees. Many of the large businesses I know have dedicated meditation spaces. Prudential has like meditation rooms. That's where I used to work. Meditation rooms where people can go throughout the day. One of my clients who works for Morgan Stanley, a top tier investment advisory firm, had one of their, I think, chief investment officers, or at least like a portfolio manager who used to be a monk who came back into the business world, was leading 100 Morgan Stanley associates through a guided meditation in one of their big auditoriums. Like mindfulness is here. It's mainstream because we recognize the benefits of being able to reduce our stress, to interrupt our patterns. Breath work, I believe, is even an easier thing for most people to get into because most people who are going 100 miles an hour are intimidated by the idea of going to zero in meditation. And a lot of people give up because of that fact, which is why when you see some of the more gentle introductions to meditation, it's typically focusing on breathing because at least it gives someone something to do. And what I'm saying here is I believe that breath work is about to have a moment like meditation did over the last few years because of the fact that we are entering this arena where we're going to need more tools to manage our stress, our anxiety, to elevate our performance. And breath work is an easy way to do that. In a very short period of time, you can experience real tangible benefits. You don't have to wait for it. Whereas sometimes with meditation, you do. Like breath work happens right here, right now. And there are tremendous ambassadors of breath work that are emerging everywhere. And the most notable one is Wim Hof, who's an absolute character. He's nicknamed the Iceman because he holds, I think, like 24 world records for cold exposure, right? Like he has climbed the first summit of Mount Everest in tennis shoes and shorts because he has learned these profound breathing techniques that has allowed him to alkaline his body. And we'll talk about what that means in a second, where he's been able to enhance his circulatory system to such an extent where he actually, like cold exposure is actually not threatening to him, but it actually enhances the quality of his respiratory system, his circulatory system, his immune system. He has trained citizens like us, like average people, in a very short period of time to boost their immune systems to such a level that it actually baffles scientists. So there's this one study that I don't have the exact details of it, but it's pretty well cited, where third-party scientific study was conducted on the Wim Hof breathing method 20 people were taken into a lab, 10 people were a control group who weren't exposed to Wim Hof, the other 10 were. And he trained them over a period of time in some breathing techniques. It wasn't that long. I think it was just a few days. And then a low-grade form of toxins were actually injected into people's bodies. The 10 people who he trained and the 10 people who he didn't train. All 10 people in the control group who didn't train were infected by this toxin. The 10 people who he trained had no signs of the toxin in their body. And that's just one of a number of cases of how these breathing techniques and how his practices have been used to help boost people's immune systems. So what he talks about is through breath work, we can quickly bring our bodies into an alkaline state. Now, I'm no expert here on what it means to be alkaline, but what it really, my base understanding of that is when our body is in an alkaline state, it means we are highly oxygenated. It means that our organs, our tissues, our extremities are oxygenated. When we are sitting most times of the day, our body's circulatory system isn't giving oxygen to our fingertips, our toes, to the rest of our body, our organs, as we need them to be. When we are taking shallow breaths, we're not getting as much oxygen as we need to send it to our vital organs and to our extremities. And as we are now cooped up at home more often, we are also not moving as much. I think I've seen some stats that have come out on how many steps people are taking on a daily basis has plummeted by 30, 40, or 50% on average. And I certainly know that's been true for me because, how much can I walk inside of a small apartment as best as I try? That's why breathing is becoming much more important. And when our body is alkaline, it reduces inflammation and chronic pain in our body. There have been studies that have been shown from the National Institute of Health in the U.S. National Library of Medicine that our Western American diet, but when we say Western, it could be applied to European countries. It can be many European countries, not all. Australia, New Zealand, is that our diet is actually acidic. So either your body is acidic or it's alkaline. And when your body is acidic, as we typically are based on the food that we consume in our Western diet, it can lead to this experience called chronic low-grade acidosis. Chronic low-grade acidosis. And what that can produce in our body is chronic pain, inflammation. It's typically associated with chronic back pain. And this is when we are more susceptible to illness and disease. Now, again, I'm no doctor, but I've read enough of these studies to show that if we aren't moving enough, if we aren't breathing properly, then we can fall into this chronic low-grade acidosis in our bodies. We can get sick more often. We can be sluggish more often. We're not as resilient. And these things that we chalk up to being older, I'm getting older, it's actually really just a byproduct of not moving enough, not breathing properly, eating foods that are highly acidic, and not being alkalined in our body more often. So these techniques help to bring our body into an alkaline state. I think this is a great jumping off point for us to pause on part 1 of a beginner's guide to breathwork. And tomorrow we'll come back and I'll share with you the 3 exercises, 3 practices that I've been doing over the past 18 months that have really helped me to reduce my stress, to get energized quickly throughout the day, to boost my immune system, and also to wind down at the end of the night. So tune back in tomorrow for part 2 of A Beginner's Guide to Breathwork.